My brother, the genius doctor. He stole my research, my name, and my place. And when I asked for help, my parents said, "Leave it, daughter. It's for the good of the family." At that moment, I understood. It wasn't just my job that they had taken. It was my voice. But what they didn't know, because silence also speaks, and mine, one day, would echo louder than all of theirs. Years later, the whole world repeated the name they tried to erase, Silva technique. But when the truth came out, it wasn't through shouting, nor through revenge. It was with a lecture in front of the same brother who called me a shadow.
The brilliance of Rafael's office was reflected in his parents' proud gaze. Framed diplomas, photos from conferences, and magazine articles covered the walls, displaying an almost theatrical success. Clara, discreetly, observed from afar while serving wine during the dinner celebrating her brother's new award. She tried to smile, but felt that the constant applause drowned out any sound coming from her. While the guests extolled the family genius, Clara thought about the lonely hours spent in her small clinic, testing millimeter-precise adjustments to implants. Her work was invisible, but it carried a profound meaning, restoring dignity to real smiles, not just aesthetic ones. Yet no one asked about it. Success, for her family, had another form, brighter, more marketable. After dinner, Clara tried to talk about a breakthrough she had made in her research. She excitedly showed some graphs, believing that for the first time someone would listen. Rafael smiled indulgently and said, "Interesting, sis. Maybe I can help you get some visibility." The parents nodded, not understanding the content, but already certain that if it passed through their eldest son's hands, it would be something big. That night, alone in her room, Clara reviewed her notes. Months of study, bone pressure calculations, and technical details that could revolutionize the implant procedure were all there. Still, the echo of her brother's words wouldn't leave her mind. "I can help you." It seemed like a compliment, but there was something there, a promise of appropriation disguised as generosity. In the following days, Rafael began asking for more details, claiming scientific curiosity. Clara, trusting him, shared everything, without imagining that she was handing over her creation. The bond of trust between siblings was sacred to her, but for him, it was an opportunity. When she saw Rafael leave with a copy of her reports, her heart hesitated, but the fear of seeming suspicious prevented her from questioning him. On a random Friday, Clara arrived home to find her parents and brother gathered together, excited. "Rafa is going to present a new project at the International Congress," her mother announced. Her heart raced. "My project?" she wanted to say, but the words died on her lips. Rafael simply blinked, confident. "Inspired by something we talked about." Inspired. That word tore her apart inside. That night was sleepless. Clara paced in circles, remembering every conversation, every shared file. Deep down, she already knew what was going to happen, but she didn't want to believe it. The voice of her conscience told her to react, to confront, to demand respect. But the voice of the obedient daughter, shaped by years of inferiority, whispered, "Don't cause trouble." The following day, the local medical news outlet published, "Brazilian surgeon presents innovative technique for aesthetic implants." Her brother's name shone in the headlines. Clara felt the world spin. Everything she had built with patience and pain now had another face, another name, another owner.
She sat in the chair at the doctor's office and stared into the void. The silence that had once been a refuge now seemed to mock her. She picked up her cell phone and saw her mother's messages. "Did you see? How proud I am of your brother? A genius, isn't he?" Genius. That word sounded like a sentence. That afternoon, through restrained tears, Clara understood what it meant to be invisible even to her own blood. But she didn't know yet. That would only be the first theft. The second would be the theft of her peace. What if it were you? Have you ever felt the weight of being ignored while someone else takes credit for what is yours? So subscribe to the channel now, because here, every story is about people who were forgotten, but rose again. And you'll want to be here when that turning point happens. The following Sunday was a celebration. The Silva family organized a lunch to celebrate Rafael's international success. Clara went, trying to maintain her composure, but every word of praise felt like a thorn. Her mother proudly recounted every detail of the lecture, as if she had been there. He received a standing ovation, Clara. Imagine, a Brazilian revolutionizing cosmetic dentistry. Clara forced a smile, stirring the food on her plate. Yeah, really incredible, she replied, trying to maintain a neutral tone. Inside, she felt her stomach churn. No one there suspected that this revolution had been born in the solitude of her office, not in the acclaimed hands of her brother. Her father toasted to the family's success, and her name wasn't even mentioned. During lunch, Rafael spoke eloquently about his discoveries, describing technical details that Clara recognized word for word. Each sentence was a blow. The most painful moment, however, was hearing her mother say, "It's a good thing he guides you, isn't it, daughter? You learn from him." At that moment, the air seemed to disappear. Clara took a deep breath and stood up, saying only that she needed some air. Outside, she sat in the garden, watching the wind stir the flowers she herself had planted years before. Each one seemed to symbolize a part of herself, alive, but ignored. Childhood came to mind. The good grades that were never celebrated, the school awards overlooked because Rafael won a medal too. When she returned to the table, she found Rafael laughing loudly, telling stories of famous patients. "You should work with me, sis," he said, with false generosity. "It would be good for you to learn how to deal with important people." The parents' laughter was the final chorus. Clara looked at her brother and for the first time saw not just arrogance, she saw emptiness.
At the end of the day, he locked himself in his car and wept silently. It was no longer sadness, it was grief for something he never had. Recognition, space, a voice. He turned on the radio to distract himself, but a news report about the Congress mentioned him again. Rafael Silva, the new face of dental innovation. She turned off the radio, took a deep breath, and, looking in the rearview mirror, said to herself, "One day, they'll know who I really am." And for the first time, the pain began to transform into purpose. The following weeks were filled with silence. Clara decided to immerse herself in her work, trying to shake off the weight of the injustice. In her modest office, filled with simple instruments and white walls, she rediscovered peace in every technical detail. The sound of the dental drill was almost therapeutic. "Here, at least, everything is mine," she murmured, while recording new observations about the technique she had created. One night, she was reviewing old notes and noticed a tiny flaw in the graph's structure. She corrected it with an almost imperceptible pressure adjustment. It was the finishing touch, the refinement that made the procedure perfect. She smiled for the first time in weeks. In that moment, she remembered the pure feeling of creating something for the good of people, not for recognition. She decided to document everything in a formal report, intending to publish the article under her own name. She wanted to prove, not to her brother, but to herself, that she still possessed her own genius. She sent the text to Dr. Augusto, her former mentor from university, requesting a technical review. He responded enthusiastically, "This is brilliant, Clara, and unique." But before she could officially submit the work, the unexpected happened. An international journal published an article signed by Rafael Silva, announcing the improved version of the technique. She read incredulous, every line identical to her notes recently sent to her mentor. Someone had leaked the material, and she knew exactly who would have had access to it. The disappointment was overwhelming. It was no longer just the theft of an idea. It was the complete erasure of her intellectual existence. She called Rafael, trembling. "You used my report." "Yours? Clara, you sent me an email full of errors. I just corrected it and published it properly. You should thank me." Her voice faltered. "You don't understand what you've done." "Of course I understand. I did what you didn't have the courage to do," he replied before hanging up. That conversation became a wound that would never fully heal. For the first time, Clara realized she wasn't just facing a vain brother. She was facing a man willing to destroy anyone to maintain the myth of perfection.
In the following days, she tried to talk to her parents, hoping for understanding. But she heard the same phrase repeated coldly. "Daughter, don't destroy your brother's success. Everything he does is for the good of the family." The good of the family became an invisible prison, an argument that silenced her pain and legitimized the injustice. Clara isolated herself. She spent nights awake, staring at the papers on her desk and wondering if anyone would ever believe her. There was no formal proof, only dates and drafts, and deep down, a profound exhaustion. Her faith in herself was beginning to crumble. Then, one sleepless night, something clicked inside her. "If they don't listen to me, I'll speak to the world," she thought. She opened her computer and began to write. Not an article, but a cathartic outpouring about ethics, about integrity, about being a woman in an environment that glorifies the male ego. There, the seed of a new path was born, silent, but indestructible. The International Congress of Aesthetic Dentistry was the most prestigious event of the year. Rafael was among the main attractions. Cameras followed him, flashes surrounded him. He wore his impeccable lab coat and his practiced smile, the same one that had made him a media idol. On the other side of the digital world, Clara watched the live broadcast, her heart racing with each slide she recognized. She saw her own words projected onto the giant screen. The title, the structure, the graphics, everything was hers. When Rafael described the inspiration that led him to the discovery, Clara almost dropped her computer. He told a fabricated story about a visit to an orphanage that had inspired him to seek less invasive techniques, a perfect emotional charade. The audience gave a standing ovation. Rafael smiled theatrically. The announcer called him a visionary. And Clara, in front of the screen, felt something inside her die. Not just her confidence, but the desire to keep fighting for a place the world insisted on denying her. They don't want the truth. They want a hero to love. Minutes later, her cell phone vibrated with a message from her mother. "Daughter, did you see your brother? I'm so proud. You should learn from him how to present yourself better." That was the final blow. Clara didn't reply. Instead, she closed her laptop, turned off the lights, and remained silent. The distant sound of applause echoed in her mind, like a cruel reminder that the world isn't fair to those who work in silence. In the following days, social media exploded with praise for Rafael. TV programs, interviews, invitations for partnerships. The genius doctor was becoming a phenomenon. Clara avoided opening her cell phone, but the news reached her anyway. It was impossible to hide from the name that, ironically, was also hers, Silva. But within the pain, something began to transform. Amidst the despair,
a new strength emerged, the desire to rebuild oneself outside of that narrative. If the surname Silva had been tarnished by lies, she would create a new meaning for it. On a rainy night, Clara sat down at her computer again. She opened a free website, chose a simple name, Real Smile, and wrote her first article, Ethics Lost Between Scalpels and Mirrors. She signed simply as CS. When I clicked publish, I didn't know I was starting a revolution, but for the first time, the sound of the click felt like freedom. The morning after the lecture, Clara received dozens of messages from perplexed colleagues praising Rafael. "You must be so proud of your brother," some said. Others, more attentive, asked if she had contributed to the work. Each notification was a stab in the back. Her silence was beginning to weigh on her, but the fear of family rejection prevented her from reacting. At the end of the day, she mustered her courage and went to her parents' house. The table was set, the atmosphere festive. Rafael had just arrived from the Congress, radiant, with a glass of wine in his hand. "Little sister, my speech was a success. You should have seen it," he said, without the slightest hint of guilt. Clara, trembling, replied, "I did see it, and I saw that every word was mine." Rafael's laughter froze in midair. "Yours? Oh, Clara, please. You showed me some confusing ideas. I just organized them." The father intervened, raising his voice. "Enough. This is a shameful subject. Your brother is bringing prestige to the family. You should support him." Clara looked at him, incredulous. "So the right thing to do is let them erase me?" "It's for the good of the family," he replied dryly. Those words echoed like a sentence. The good of the family, always the justification for injustice. Clara felt a knot in her chest, stood up, and left without looking back. In the street, the cold night air seemed to cut her skin. Pride and resentment mingled, and the decision began to mature. She would no longer stay there. In the following days, she discreetly sold her share of the clinic. She signed the papers with trembling but firm hands. With each signature, she felt lighter and more alone. Rafael tried to approach her with promises of partnership, but she only replied, "I don't need a stage, just peace." He laughed, not understanding. The parents reacted with shock. "Are you going to abandon us?" asked the mother, crying. "I'm not," she answered calmly. "I just don't want to abandon myself anymore." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. They didn't understand that she wasn't running away from them. She was running away from the role they had imposed on her.
A week later, Clara left. She carried few bags, a laptop, and a folder with her research notebooks. On the road, she looked in the rearview mirror and saw the house disappear on the horizon. She didn't cry. The morning had already happened a long time ago. Now it was a new beginning.
Upon arriving in the new city, she rented a small apartment and set up a simple office. The empty walls intimidated her, but they also represented a new beginning. No photos, no comparisons, she thought, just me. On the first night, standing by the window, she wrote in her diary, "They stole my name, but not my purpose." And with that phrase, the void began to give way to reconstruction. The loneliness of the new city was hard at first. Clara woke up early, but the silence of the empty office echoed too much. The phone didn't ring, patients were few, and money was starting to get tight. Still, she refused to give up. Each small appointment was a victory, proof that she could live without carrying the weight of her family on her shoulders. In her free time, she wrote. Words became therapy. She wrote about ethics, about the medical ego, about what it means to care for people instead of bodies. At night, she published her texts on the anonymous blog Real Smile. The first month passed unnoticed. Almost no one read it. But Clara continued. It was like talking to her own reflection. In the second month, something unexpected happened. A dentist from another city shared your text with the comment, "Finally, someone said what we've all been thinking." The post quietly went viral among young professionals. In just a few days, the blog gained hundreds of readers. Clara watched in disbelief. For the first time, her ideas were being heard without having to carry her brother's last name. Meanwhile, Rafael was beginning to notice the rise of this mysterious author. In interviews, reporters would ask, "What do you think of the blog, Real Smile? They say her ideas are similar to yours." He would smile uncomfortably and change the subject. The irony bothered him. He was being overshadowed by the same kind of shadow he had once cast on his sister. Clara, oblivious to fame, continued writing with passion. She created a section called Human Clinical Diary. In her writings, she recounted real patient cases, respecting anonymity, and reflected on empathy and purpose. Her texts touched hearts. One reader commented, "You don't write about teeth, you write about people." Over time, the blog transformed into a community. Dentists exchanged experiences, patients expressed gratitude. Clara began to feel something she had never felt before, a sense of belonging. And for the first time, the word Silva ceased to signify comparison. It began to signify legacy. One night, she received an email from a young dentist. "Thank you for inspiring me. I thought I would never have the courage to continue in this profession. You reminded me why I started." Clara wept silently. Those words healed wounds that even time had not been able to touch.
Even so, at times, the past returned. Sometimes she dreamed of Rafael on stage, being applauded. She would wake up in a cold sweat, remembering the sound of the applause that once haunted her. But now there was another sound in her mind, the sound of thank you notifications. Clara didn't know it yet, but her name was about to cross borders. And when that happened, there would be no more shadows, only light, won through work, pain, and truth. Months passed, and Real Smile grew like a silent wave. The blog, once a personal refuge, had become a welcoming space. Clara now woke up early to answer emails from colleagues who asked for advice, sent clinical cases, and vented about the pressure of the aesthetics market. "I thought I was the only one who felt this way," one of them said. She smiled. No, nobody was alone anymore. Writing had become her voice. In her texts, Clara spoke of ethics and humanity with such sincerity that even without revealing who she was, she earned trust. Her style was simple, yet profound, a blend of technique and soul. The post, The Difference Between Perfection and Respect, was shared thousands of times. The message was clear. Medicine didn't need to be a spectacle. With success came opportunities. A specialized magazine requested an interview with CS. She refused, maintaining her anonymity. "I don't want my face to distract from the ideas," she explained in a post. This choice intrigued readers even more. Who was the woman behind that wisdom? With each text, Clara healed a little more of herself. Writing was retelling her own story from another perspective, no longer that of the victim, but that of the creator. Sometimes she imagined what her parents would say if they knew it. Maybe they wouldn't even believe it, she thought, remembering the phrase that hurt the most. "It's for the good of the family." Dr. Augusto, her former mentor, finally found her online. He recognized her style and sent her a message. "You managed to transform pain into knowledge, Clara. That's rare." She responded gratefully, but asked for secrecy. She wasn't ready to be seen yet. Not until she was sure she could confront her past. Meanwhile, Rafael was beginning to lose control of the narrative. On social media, some professionals compared his statements to the ideas on the blog. "Is Dr. Silva taking inspiration from CS?" one could read in the comments. He, irritated, said in interviews that amateur blogs were distorting dentistry. Clara read this and laughed for a long time. The man who had always dimmed her light now needed to disdain her brilliance to protect himself. There was a poetic irony in it. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted to continue to being true to herself.
The blog grew so much that she needed to open up space for contributors. Young dentists began writing under her guidance. Clara's invisible voice was now a symphony of ethical and courageous minds. Anonymity became irrelevant. The movement spoke for itself. One night, looking at the website statistics, Clara saw over 1 million hits. She cried, not from glory, but from relief. The truth, at last, was alive, and no one could steal it again. And for the first time, he felt pride in his own silence, because from it was born a voice that the world heard. With the blog's success, Clara realized she had created something bigger than just a website, an ethical refuge amidst the chaos. Study groups began to form around the articles, and dentists from abroad started translating the texts spontaneously. The main CS was cited in forums and conferences as a reference in humanized practices. One day, he received an email from a university in Spain asking for permission to include his articles in a specialization course. Clara could hardly believe it. He replied humbly, thanking them. At the end of the message, he wrote, "How good to see that knowledge can still spread without vanity." That would become a memorable phrase in several posts that followed. Meanwhile, Rafael was beginning to feel the impact. His lectures, once packed, now had empty rows. Professionals commented on the new paradigm brought by the mysterious author. Some even compared his technique to hers, ironically, the same one he had stolen. The difference was that now, refined and documented on the blog, it bore the name Silva technique. The parents also began to notice changes. Clara's father, proud of his son's success, found the tone of the most recent interviews strange. "People are doubting Rafael," he told his wife, worried. "These bloggers are damaging his image." The mother replied, "But what if there's some truth to it?" For the first time, doubt pierced the complicit silence. Clara, on the other hand, was experiencing the opposite of ruin, flourishing. Her simple office was now always full. Patients came from other cities to meet her. "Are you CS?" they would ask, curious. She would just smile. She never confirmed. The mystery was part of the magic. During a consultation, an emotional patient told her, "Your text saved me from my fear. I was going to give up on treatment, but your words reminded me that health is about trust." Clara felt tears welling up. For the first time, someone recognized her impact, not by name, but by its meaning. Behind the scenes, laboratories began contacting her, interested in testing the Silva technique. Clara refused million-dollar offers, maintaining the integrity of the project. "I prefer that they save smiles than sell brands." This phrase went viral, solidifying her image as an ethical and inspiring professional.
Meanwhile, Rafael, in desperation, hired a marketing team to try to modernize his image. But the more he tried to appear human, the more fake he sounded. His smile, once a symbol of success, now seemed like just a mask of a cracked ego. One night, while watching a video of him trying to rebut the criticism, Clara simply sighed. He still doesn't understand, she thought, the difference between being admired and being respected. The wind blew through the open window of the office. Outside, the city lights flickered, and the distant noise of the streets reminded her of the applause from years ago. But now, that sound no longer hurt her. Because this time, the applause was for her, even though the world didn't yet know her name. Rafael Silva had always been the center of attention, But now, for the first time, the spotlight seemed to waver. Comments on social media shifted from praise to questions. Why do his words sound so much like those on his blog? Real smile? Why? They asked. He replied dismissively, "Those bloggers copy my ideas." But deep down, he felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. At his lectures, the audience no longer received him with the same enthusiasm. Some glances were of distrust, others of indifference. His star status was beginning to dissipate. Rafael spent sleepless nights reading blog posts to understand what made that author so admired. What he saw there irritated him. Sincerity and simplicity, two things he had never learned to fake. One night, drunk with rage, he called his mother. "This CS is hurting me. I need to find out who she is." "It must be envy, son," she replied, trying to comfort him. But the tone of her voice was no longer the same. The blind gleam with which she defended her firstborn was beginning to fade. For the first time, his mother doubted him. Meanwhile, Clara continued her calm and disciplined routine. She saw patients, wrote articles, and managed her blog. There was no rush, no pretension. When a journalist approached her with a documentary proposal about the mysterious ethical dentist, she refused. "I have already said what I have said. But who are you, after all? I am someone who has learned to speak without shouting." In her office, Clara still kept the folder with the original drafts of her research. She didn't burn them, nor did she hide them. They were a memento of the beginning, and a reminder of how much she had grown since then. "What was my wound became my foundation," she wrote in one of the most shared posts on her blog. Meanwhile, the inevitable happened. A group of Spanish researchers published a paper comparing the techniques presented by Rafael and the mysterious CS, and concluded that Rafael's was a clear case of plagiarism. The document went viral. Within days, his reputation crumbled. Contracts were suspended, invitations canceled.
The family panicked. The father called Clara for the first time in months. "Daughter, they're attacking your brother, saying he copied someone." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Maybe it's time he learned what it's like to lose applause," Clara replied calmly. Her father tried to insist, but she hung up. Desperate, Rafael hired lawyers and press agents. He tried to erase the traces of his past, but the truth was relentless. Each new post from Sorriso Real, Real Smile, seemed like a silent response to his lies. The public began to connect the dots. What if CS is the one he stole from? Deep down, Rafael already knew the answer, and that certainty gnawed at him more than any headline. The blog Sorriso Real, Real Smile, crossed borders. Clara's posts, now translated into several languages, reached universities, congresses, and scientific journals. The Silva technique, a name given by a group of Italian dentists, was officially recognized as a revolutionary, minimally invasive method. Clara remained silent, observing everything from afar. For the first time, the truth didn't need to be told. It revealed itself. A large international laboratory contacted the blog's administration. They wanted to meet the author and offer a partnership to expand the research. Clara hesitated. For a moment, the old fear returned, the fear of being seen. But looking at the waiting room full of patients smiling confidently, she understood that she no longer needed to hide. She replied, "I agree to talk, but the project is collective, not about me." Meanwhile, Rafael was living his own personal hell. His sponsors abandoned him, his students stopped following him, and the brilliance of the genius doctor turned into scandal. He tried to fight back, but every defense sounded empty. The world that had idolized him now judged him with the same intensity. The press was unforgiving. Hero or imposter, the headlines proclaimed. One afternoon, Rafael saw a report on international TV about the recognition of the Silva technique and its global impact. The reporter said, "The author remains anonymous, but her legacy is transforming lives." He froze. The name, Silva, hit him like a blow. For the first time, the word that had always elevated him now humbled him. Clara followed the repercussions in silence. Her mentor, Dr. Augusto, visited her and said with a smile, "Justice has come and you didn't need to raise your voice." She replied, "Because the truth doesn't shout, it waits." This phrase would become legendary on social media and would be repeated in lectures and classes around the world. Days later, Clara received an unexpected invitation. The International Committee of the Aesthetic Dentistry Congress wanted her to be the keynote speaker at the next event, the same Congress where Rafael had presented his discovery years before. The circle was closing.
Upon reading the invitation, Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Not from fear, but from recognition. Going back there is not about revenge, she thought. It's about closing the cycle. She accepted. The news spread through the medical circles like wildfire. CS will reveal herself, the rumors said. Rafael, desperate, tried to contact her. He sent messages, called, pleaded. "Clara, we need to talk. You're going to destroy everything that's left of our family." She read it, took a deep breath, and replied simply, "I wasn't the one who destroyed it. I just stopped pretending." That night, Clara looked at herself in the mirror. The woman reflected there was no longer anyone's shadow. She was her own light, and the world, at last, was ready to see her. The email arrived on a quiet afternoon. The subject line was simple: Official invitation to the International Congress of Aesthetic Dentistry. Keynote speaker, Dr. C.S. Silva. She read and reread it several times, unable to believe it. The event, the same one where Rafael had stolen her research, now invited her as a guest of honor. It was as if fate had carefully preserved this irony. For a few minutes, she stood motionless, staring at the screen. Memories of that day rushed back like a whirlwind. The audience applauding her brother, the emptiness in her chest, her father's words, "It's for the good of the family." Her stomach churned, but she quickly took a deep breath. "Now the good of the family is the truth," she murmured. She called Dr. Augusto, the mentor who had always believed in her. "Should I go?" she asked. He replied without hesitation, "You've already gone, Clara. You just need to show up." The phrase echoed within her like a silent nudge. For the first time, there was no fear, only purpose. In the following days, he prepared the lecture. He didn't want to turn the moment into revenge, but into liberation. He reread his articles, reviewed the data, and put together an impeccable technical presentation. On the last slide, he wrote only one sentence: "Integrity is the bridge between pain and respect." Her name began circulating in the specialized media. CS, the author of the Silva technique, will present herself for the first time. Speculation about her identity took over social media. Some thought she was a foreigner, others said it was a group of authors. No one imagined she was the forgotten sister of the brilliant doctor. Rafael, upon hearing the news, was devastated. He spent nights trying to speak with the organizers, arguing that the event should not be associated with a fraud. But his reputation was too tarnished. Those who once idolized him now avoided his name. "You dug your own grave, Rafael," his advisor said as he resigned. At home, the parents reacted with unease. "Is Clara really going to show up? This will reopen old wounds, Henry," said the mother. The father replied tensely, "Perhaps it was about time."
The weight of years of silence was beginning to crush them. For the first time, they saw themselves not as victims, but as accomplices. Clara packed her bags without haste. She put in only the essentials: her laptop, a simple dress, the original papers from her research, and an envelope containing the letter she had written to herself in the past. "You are enough." She folded it carefully and took it with her. On the flight, she watched the clouds through the window. There was no more anger, only serenity. This time, she thought, "I'm not going to prove anything. I'm going to be whole." And with a firm heart, he returned to the city he had once sworn never to set foot in again. The airport was the same, but everything seemed different. Clara walked among the people with a strange calm, like someone carrying a secret that no longer weighed her down. Outside, the air smelled of memories: childhood, the old clinic, the muffled arguments. Each step echoed memories that once hurt and now simply existed. She took a taxi to the hotel booked by the Congressional Committee. On the way, she passed the facade of the old office, now renovated and with the name Silva and Associates erased from the sign. The place seemed empty, as if the wall itself had forgotten its former pride. A mixed feeling of melancholy and peace enveloped her. Upon arriving at the hotel, she found Dr. Augusto waiting for her in the lobby. "I didn't want to miss this moment," he said emotionally. "You're about to rewrite your own story." Clara smiled. "No, doctor. It's already been written. I'm just going to read it aloud." That night, while reviewing the last slides, she received an unexpected message. It was from Rafael. "Please, we need to talk before the lecture. It's important." Clara looked at her phone for a few seconds without reacting. Then she typed, "Everything that needed to be said has been written. Tomorrow, I will speak publicly, but not about you." And she blocked the number. The next day, he woke to the sound of notifications. Newspapers, magazines, and online portals were commenting on his presence. "Who is the real CS?" read the main headline. The suspense only heightened the anticipation. Clara put on her white lab coat, tied her hair back, and looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time, she saw a woman who owed no one anything. The auditorium was packed. Professionals from various countries filled the seats, anxious. The lights dimmed, and the master of ceremonies announced, "With you, the author of the Silva technique." The audience fell silent. Clara climbed the steps with firm steps. When the spotlight hit her, a murmur ran through the hall. The face of the woman the world had ignored was at last on display. Rafael, hidden among the audience, felt his chest burn. He tried to disguise it with a tense smile, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Clara, on the stage, didn't look at him. She opened the slides, took a deep breath, and began. This technique was born not from ambition, but from pain. From the pain of being invisible, and of transforming that pain into a method.
The audience listened in absolute silence. Each word was a wound healing. She didn't mention Rafael's name, nor his parents' names. She spoke about ethics, about empathy, and about the power of building something true without needing to destroy anyone. In the end, the auditorium erupted in applause. But unlike years ago, Clara didn't cry. She only smiled. Because this time, every round of applause had a specific recipient. And the sound, that sound that once symbolized pain, was now the echo of freedom. The conference had ended for the day, and the hall was almost empty. Clara was alone on stage, gathering her materials. The spotlights were slowly fading, and the silence seemed to embrace her. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't need to turn around. She would recognize that sound anywhere.
Rafael. "Clara," he said, his voice hoarse, a mixture of guilt and wounded pride. "We need to talk." She remained with her back to him, focused on putting away the papers. "You've spoken enough for me, Rafael. Now it's my turn to have peace." He took a few steps forward, insisting, "I didn't come to fight. I came to ask to share the credit. If you expose me, our family will never recover." She turned slowly, her gaze serene. "Share the credit? I spent half my life sharing what was mine, even my identity. What's left, Rafael, isn't credit. It's a consequence." He swallowed hard. His former confidence crumbled into nervousness. "You don't understand. They made me this way." "I understand perfectly," Clara replied. "But at some point, we stop blaming others and start choosing who we want to be." Rafael looked away, unable to bear the weight of those words. There was something new in her, a strength he had never possessed, precisely because he had always lived for the approval of others. A long silence filled the room. Outside, the wind whipped against the windows, as if the world too awaited that outcome. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. "Nothing," Clara replied. "The truth has already revealed itself. I don't need to destroy you. You did that by erasing me." Rafael took a step back, stunned. For the first time, he seemed smaller, not physically, but in spirit. The mask of the genius doctor was breaking, and the man behind it trembled. "I just wanted to be admired," he confessed, almost whispering. "And I just wanted to be seen. The difference is that I learned I don't need that anymore." She picked up the folder with the papers and looked at him one last time. "Rafael, I forgive you, not for what you did to me, but for what you did to yourself." He tried to speak, but no words came out. Clara walked to the exit without looking back. Each step was a liberation.
As the audience left the hall, Dr. Augusto approached and said, "You didn't just change dentistry, Clara. You changed the meaning of success." She looked at the empty auditorium and replied, "I didn't change anything, doctor. I just reminded the world of what it had forgotten." Outside, the sun was beginning to set. Clara walked to the garden, breathed in the fresh air, and for the first time, felt lightness. The pain no longer existed, only the legacy. The months following the Congress were a whirlwind of changes. Clara became a world reference in humanized dentistry, but she continued to refuse awards, interviews, and magazine covers. "My name isn't what matters," she said. The real reward was seeing her articles become the basis of teaching in universities and being applied in public clinics, where smiles had more stories than just aesthetics. The blog Sorriso Real officially transformed into a foundation dedicated to ethics and access to oral health. Clara began leading a mentorship program for young dentists, teaching not only technique, but purpose. "The hand that heals must also listen," she would tell her students. Her words, spoken simply, became the motto of a generation. During the foundation's opening ceremony, the parents were present. The father, now older and quieter, watched his daughter speak with a different look, the look of someone who finally saw what had always been there. When she stepped down from the stage, he approached her. "Clara, do you forgive us?" She smiled, tired and serene. "I forgave you a long time ago. I just needed to learn to love myself first." Rafael, on the other hand, had disappeared from the spotlight. He lived in another city, far from the cameras and famous patients. The media, which had once praised him, now ignored him. His luxurious office had been sold. But Clara didn't hate him. In fact, sometimes she thought of him with compassion. She was a distorted mirror of what I could have become if I had chosen the same path, she reflected. One day, upon arriving at the foundation, she found an envelope on the table. The sender was Rafael Silva. Her heart raced. She opened it slowly. Inside, there was a handwritten letter. The first words disarmed her. "Clara, I finally understand what you meant in that auditorium." He recounted how he had started working in a small community clinic, and that for the first time, he saw people in his patients, not trophies. The letter ended with just one sentence. "Can I be your student now?" She smiled. Tears came silently, not of sadness, but of recognition. She put the letter in the drawer and replied by email, "The room is open, Rafael. It always has been." I wasn't expecting him to come, but somehow that gesture tenderly closed the loop. In the late afternoon, she went for a walk in the foundation's courtyard. The garden was full of young volunteers, laughing, talking, sharing ideas. One of them greeted her with a shy smile. "Doctor, thank you for reminding us why we chose this profession." She smiled back, with that calm look that carries wisdom and scars at the same time.
When the door closed, Rafael collapsed onto the floor of the empty auditorium. For the first time, he understood what silence truly was. Not the silence of the audience, but the silence of those who lose the right to be heard. And outside, Clara looked up at the city sky, where it had all begun. For the first time, she breathed without guilt. The truth, at last, was complete and no longer needed to be told. The next day dawned clear, with a sky in shades of gold and gray. The Congress was packed again. The anticipation was immense. Everyone wanted to hear more from the woman who had transformed ethics into revolution. Clara observed the attentive faces in the audience and felt her heart calm. There was no more fear, only gratitude. When she took the stage, the audience rose to applaud, but she raised her hand, gesturing for silence. "Today, I didn't come to teach a technique," she began. "I came to talk about what brought me here, the power of truth." Her words sounded like music, firm, clear, painfully human. She spoke about ego and compassion, about how the glare of fame can blind the soul. "I was taught to believe that success is being applauded. Today I understand that success is being able to sleep peacefully." The audience remained silent, absorbing each sentence. Some wiped away tears, others simply nodded, moved. In the middle of the crowd were her parents. They had come unannounced, discreetly, sitting in the last row. Her father held her mother's arm, visibly emotional. When Clara looked towards them, for a moment time stood still. She didn't smile, but her eyes said it all. "Now you see." Rafael wasn't there. After the previous night's conversation, he had disappeared from the event. But even in his absence, his shadow lingered over the auditorium. Only this time, not as a burden, but as a contrast. Clara's brilliance no longer depended on his absence. It was her own light, one with pain, but filled with peace. At the end of the presentation, Clara showed the last slide. Integrity is when you do in the dark shines brighter than what you show under the spotlight. The audience erupted in applause, but she just stood there, absorbing the sound that had once brought her anguish and now sounded like forgiveness. As she stepped off the stage, she was surrounded by journalists, students, and colleagues. "Doctor, what's the secret to your success?" they asked. Clara replied with a serene smile. The secret is having failed for a long time and having learned from it. Backstage, the father approached, hesitant. "Daughter, we made a mistake." She simply touched his arm. "Me too, Dad, for expecting you to see me before I saw myself." It was the quietest and most sincere hug of their lives.
As the sun set, Clara reflected on the journey they had taken. The invisible girl, the silenced woman, the voice that had become a chorus. Truth, she thought, is not a weapon, it's a seed. And each student there was proof that the seed had blossomed. Upon arriving at the office, he sat down at his computer and wrote the last post for Real Smile. "One day, they stole my research, my name, and my space, but they could never steal my essence. Today, I understand that true success is not about being admired, but about being honest, even when no one is watching." He clicked on Post, and she smiled. The sound of that click, the same one that years before had symbolized a new beginning, was now the sound of legacy. And for the first time, Clara Silva was no longer just a shadow. It was light itself. They stole her name, but they could never steal who she was. If you've ever had your light turned off, this channel is for you. Sign up now, because here we transform pain into legacy. And every week, a new story will remind you, nobody is invisible forever.